As the world continues to focus on the invasion of Ukraine in Europe and the Israel-Hamas situation in the Middle East, another less known but equally catastrophic and ugly conflict is taking place on the other side of the world. The Republic of the Union of Myanmar, or simply Myanmar or Burma, has been tied up in an ongoing civil war for the past 3 years, as a coup d'etat in 2021 saw the semi-democratic government of Aung San Suu Kyi overthrown by an ultra-authoritarian military regime under the General Min Aung Hlaing. As armed guerrilla warfare rages across the country, the war will likely claim the lives of thousands more, with a recent death toll estimating that over 50,000 people have been killed since the coup, along with what seems to be an imminent refugee crisis on the horizon. The future of Myanmar is still very much unclear, but to understand where Myanmar might be headed, it's important to understand a little history of the country, which will help to explain why this is happening in the first place. A country in Southeast Asia, Myanmar is currently bordered by the nation-states of Bangladesh and India to the east, China to the north, and Laos and Thailand to the south and west. With a total population of around 54.5 million people, it comfortably sits as the 27th largest country in the world and the 5th most populous country in Southeast Asia, firmly behind its neighbour Thailand, but still significantly higher than the 6th most populous country in the region, Malaysia. The prehistoric era saw the land inhabited by several early kingdoms, notably the Pew city-states and later the Mon Kingdom. These early inhabitants are believed to have later adopted and developed a South Indian form of Buddhism, an era in which modern-day Myanmar's deeply Buddhist demographics can be traced back to. With roughly 88% of the population practicing Buddhism, the remaining 12% are made up of Christians at around 6%, Muslims at around 4%, with animists and Hindus making up the final 1%. By the 9th century, the Bamar people in the north had established a powerful pagan empire, which lasted around 400 years until its eventual collapse under Mongol invasion during the early 13th century. At this point, various kingdoms and dynasties rose and fell, and by the early 19th century, the region became a colony of the former British Empire, fighting 3 successive wars with the British over the course of the century. The region briefly came under Japanese occupation during the final years of World War II and later gained its independence from the British in 1948 under the leadership of a man named Thakin Nu. With the official name of the Union of Burma, the government adopted a democratic system that aimed to rebuild a struggling Burmese economy in a volatile post-World War environment. The new parliamentary system seemed all good and well, although Nu's Burma grappled with issues of not only economics, but severe political instability as various ethnic and communist factions who felt excluded from Nu's deeply Buddhist vision for the country began insurgencies, ultimately culminating with the 1962 coup d'etat, in which the Burmese military, led by General Ne Win, overthrew Nu's democratically elected government and created the Union Revolutionary Council, marking the beginning of years of military rule and dictatorship in the country. Ne Win essentially transformed the country into a one-party totalitarian state in which the country suffered through years of economic isolation under socialism and harsh political repression, which eventually culminated with the 8888 uprisings of 1988, with widespread demonstrations and riots breaking out across the country, leading to the deaths of over 8,000 people as opposition to military rule was brutally put down. Following the uprisings of 1988, the State Law and Order Restoration Council, or SLORC, a military junta which ousted the former government of Ne Win, was established through a second coup under the leadership of military general Saw Mwang, and later became known as the State Peace and Development Council, or SPDC. The official name of the country was changed to Myanmar in 1989, and a year later in 1990 political reforms called for multi-party elections to be held, in which the National League for Democracy Party, or NLD, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, won a landslide victory over the military-favoured National Unity Party, or NUP. As expected though, the junta would not accept the results of the elections, later imprisoning the leaders of the NLD, which included Aung San Suu Kyi, who a year later in 1991 was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her strives towards a democratic and progressive Myanmar. Following the elections of 1991, the military continued to hold the reins for over 20 years, until in 2011 a series of reforms were made as a result of international pressure and internal challenges. This included the release of political prisoners, including NLD's Suu Kyi, implementation of new labour laws, and relaxation of press censorship. 4 years later, in 2015, elections were again held, in which the NLD party, again led by Aung San Suu Kyi, won another landslide victory, marking a historic shift towards a free democracy in Myanmar. The military, who still held significant sway in the country and its politics, were then forced to cooperate with this new form of government. Despite its progressive approach, the NLD faced international condemnation 2 years later, along with allegations of ethnic cleansing and even genocide, following the Rohingya crisis of 2017. This saw a mass exodus of over 700,000 of the Muslim Rohingya population in Myanmar's southwestern Rakhine state into neighbouring Bangladesh, and is frequently cited as one of the worst humanitarian catastrophes of the 21st century. Nevertheless, Myanmar remained a semi-democratic government until the elections of 2020 saw yet another landslide victory for Suu Kyi's NLD party. But it didn't take long for the military, or Tatmadaw, who on February the 1st of 2021 staged yet another coup d'etat on the grounds of electoral fraud, claims that are widely disputed around the world since the military provided zero evidence. Nevertheless, the events of February the 1st saw the military general Min Aung Hlaing handed power as de facto ruler of the nation, as San Chi's government was deposed along with arrests of several ex-government officials, launching the state of Myanmar into a full-scale civil war, as non-violent protests quickly led to armed uprisings all over the country. This savage and bloody repression of dissidents led to the formation of the National Unity Government, or NUG, led by officials of the government ousted in the 2021 coup. This later led to the creation of an armed wing called the People's Defence Forces, or PDF, who later declared a defensive war against the military junta, a war that, according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Projects, or ACLED, and the United Nations, has claimed the lives of over 50,000 people and displaced around 2.3 million more as of February 2024, with many of Myanmar's neighbours, such as India and China, having to deal with waves of refugees fleeing the country. What you must realise, however, is that the ethnic makeup of Myanmar is extremely diverse, and the PDF, who are largely made up of the Bamar people, are not the only ones waging war against the military. Located largely in and around Myanmar's peripheral states are the various ethnic minority groups, many of whom have been fighting for greater autonomy ever since Burmese independence. And despite having little to nothing in common, many of these groups have been conducting armed insurgencies against the military, seemingly operating on the principle of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, although the exact reasons for the insurgencies are unclear. Late last year, 3 armed ethnic groups, together known as the Three Brotherhood Alliance, launched a large-scale coordinated offensive across the northeastern Shan state, in what became known as Operation 1027, claiming to have captured over 100 military outposts in several towns, including key border crossings with China. This brings us to today, where many of the country's territories are still firmly in control of the military, including the key cities and financial hubs of Yangon, Mandalay, and Naypyidaw, the country's capital. On Myanmar's outskirts and inner periphery, thousands of insurgents are fighting to regain control of what could be a semi-democratic nation-state, with the NUG stating that, quote, all roads lead to Naypyidaw. Recently, on February the 10th, 2024, the military announced new conscription laws forcing all men between the ages of 18 and 35, and women between the ages of 18 and 27 to serve a minimum of 2 years in the military, as it struggles in a multi-front war against rebel insurgents all across the country. The war in Myanmar shows no signs of ending anytime soon, although recent escalations in war efforts may mean that the military junta currently in control could be headed for defeat in the not-so-distant future. So, what would a post-military Myanmar look like? In the event of the regime being defeated, the diverse ethnic groups would no longer share a common enemy, rather a common goal of overcoming political differences and agreeing on the way in which the country would be governed going forward. Formal recognition of the shadow National Unity Government and its former allies would go a long way to improving the post-war morale and facilitating proper cooperation between groups. If this all goes well, it could lead to further recognition by the international community, particularly from Washington and Brussels, along with the removal of economic sanctions which have been placed on Myanmar because of its oppressive military regime. There is a chance, however, that if the military manages to cling onto power, a post-war Myanmar could collapse into a bunch of smaller self-governing territories, similar to the dissolution of Yugoslavia. In this instance, we would likely see the territory home to major population and financial centres still under the de facto control of the regime, with the more sparsely populated periphery under the control of various rebel factions. The war in Myanmar has left a profound impact on the country's history, and its future still remains very much unclear. As of the making of this video, there are real indications that the military regime could be coming to an end, but for how much longer we simply do not know. The country is at a vital crossroads, and its future will depend on the collective will of its people in a decades-long battle for democracy. I hope that you managed to learn a few things from this video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like and a comment, as it goes a really long way in getting the video out there and promoting it to a larger audience. If you have any suggestions for things you'd like to see, leave a comment below and I'll be sure to have it covered. Bye for now.